Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for attending. I see Todd's jumping on too, to the Hull and Chandler Leadership Series. Hull and Chandler is dedicated to obtaining positive results for clients facing real-world problems. Whether you're a business seeking legal solutions, a victim of an auto accident looking to be made whole, or hoping to draft that will that you've been putting off for far too long, our award-winning attorneys are available to assist you. Please visit our website at hullandchandler.com or call us at 704-375-8488 to schedule a consultation. The law firm of Hull and Chandler is proud to sponsor the Leadership Series, a program where Hull and Chandler attorney Rocky Cabagnot interviews local and regional leaders in the nonprofit, private, and public sectors to discuss the real-world interplay of law, business, and social dynamics within the context of our continuously changing times. Since 2005, Rocky has been representing nonprofits and public charities. In addition to having represented scores of nonprofits and public charities, Rocky founded a legal clinic for nonprofits at an ABA law school in Charlotte that provided pro bono legal assistance to hundreds of Charlotte area nonprofits for over 5 years. And he serves as the executive director of a multi-million-dollar budgeted nonprofit for over 2 years. At our firm, Rocky makes legal services more accessible to nonprofits by offering outside general counsel services via our firm's affordable monthly legal subscription plan. With this subscription program, nonprofits can gain access to an experienced nonprofit attorney with a nonprofit senior management experience without breaking the bank. So Rocky, take it away.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome to another episode of our leadership series. Again, I just want to thank all of you for coming out on a Wednesday, particularly coming out of Labor Day weekend. Many of you might still be just like trying to get back into where your inbox is or such. So again, thank you for coming and joining us here on Wednesday. So today we're going to talk a little bit about our neighbor. And so obviously we're talking about Charlotte. Well, who is Charlotte's neighbor? We've got plenty of neighbors. And so last time on the leadership series, we talked about our neighbor to the north, Concord, right? Talking about what they're doing about issues of affordable housing with Dr. Patrick Graham. Today, we're going to talk about our neighbor to the south, and we're talking about Rock Hill and also the Tri-County area. We're talking about South Carolina, and joining us are going to be representatives from Carolina Community Actions. And the funny thing is, I always thought it was Carolina Community Action, but there actually is an S on the end of that. So I love to find out why. I mean, because that's actually more impactful, because it's better to have actions than just action, right? Because I think there's like one versus multiple. But we're going to talk a little bit about our neighbor to the south, that the growing economic development region of the Tri-County area in South Carolina. But more importantly, as we look in the news, we see things such as the great big important multi-million-dollar investment by the Carolina Panthers in Rock Hill, a huge complex that will have obviously sports facilities and medical, retail, hospitality, entertainment, which will be sure to generate a lot of economic growth, a lot of jobs, a lot of opportunities. But organizations like Carolina Community Actions are community action agencies. They are dedicated to addressing the root causes of poverty. And so really a lot of our discussion is going to be about issues of equity and access and justice, even as we see growing economic growth in this region. And so we're joined by the executive director, Karen Brackett-Browning, who will be talking about, these issues. And so I know, and many of you may know Karen from her time as an executive director of a nonprofit, the Charlotte Area Fund, for many, many years in the Charlotte area. But, so for both Karen and Iris, who I guess I see in the back there, I like to give this opportunity for each of you to kind of tell a little bit about your stories, because I like to ground the discussion. I don't want to just jump in there and get you the stats and the statistics. And of course, if you got some slides or anything, let us know. We'll give you a share thing. But find out a little bit more about who we're talking about, and really what is your path to nonprofit leadership, because this is a leadership series. We're talking to regional leaders, but there's an origin story, right? You always want to know a little bit about a backstory. So for both of you, could you introduce yourselves to our audience and talk a little bit about your path to community action, and how did you, what what things in your life got you to want to do this kind of work? And then we'll talk a little bit more about the organization itself.
Okay, well, first of all, Rocky, thank you so much, and appreciation and gratitude to Hull and Chandler for the leadership series and for highlighting Carolina Community Action. So as Rocky has aforementioned, I am Karen Brackett-Browning, the Executive Director of Carolina Community Actions. And so my story is a simple one. I joined a community action agency right out of college, many years ago. Right out of college, I became a case manager. Was ingrained in helping the community, hail from, I'm a PK, I hail from a minister, a father who's a minister and a mother who was an educator, but were very much community activists. So I think that was ingrained in us as we grew up. So as I finished school, finished college, University of South Carolina, came to work for Carolina Community Actions in Rock Hill.
Yep.
So worked for them for about 9 years, and then was recruited to Charlotte to become the executive director there for the community action agency that serves Mecklenburg County for 21 years. And then back in December 2017, I was recruited again by Carolina Community Actions and was allowed to come back home. So I've been here as their executive director since 2017, working to help the community. And we service the areas of Chester, Lancaster, Fairfield, Union, and York County, South Carolina. So that's my path to community action and as an executive director. I'll yield to Iris at this point.
Good afternoon. So I'm I77 Hubbard, and I am the Community Outreach Program Director here at Carolina Community Actions. I've been here about 14 months. I, like Karen, I'm a preacher's kid, and so I've lived a life of philanthropy and of giving back. And so my career started actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was Executive Director of my sister's house, which was a transitional living center associated with the Salvation Army in Charlotte. I came to Rock Hill to head the Rock, Renew Our Community, and was there for over 10 years. And then kind of took a little sabbatical, but felt the need to come back. And fortunately, this position came open, so I've been here, like I said, about 14 months. So I spent the majority of my career in the homeless sector and in helping people just move from a position of being impoverished and without hope to a position of hope and of seeing a brighter future.
Wonderful. Well, so thank you for sharing about a little bit about yourselves. And I know that, Karen, you went into a little bit about Carolina Community Actions, but for those of the audience who aren't super familiar, with the organization or with community action in general, because, you know, for those of us who know about community action, we know it is a specific type of nonprofit. It's not just a nonprofit. It can, it can be. And so maybe for those who are not super familiar, when we keep saying we're community action, what does community action mean, and how does your organization reflect and embody the values of community action?
Well, this is a part that I love, telling the history of community action. So actually on August 20th, 1964, President Lyndon Johnson signed into law the Economic Opportunity Act as a part of his war on poverty. And as a result of that, that created the Community Action Network. So that's how many of the community action agencies got started. For example, Charlotte Area Fund predates the federal office because they were started in '63. Here, this particular organization was started in '65. So the purpose was to expand educational opportunities, eliminate poverty, provide health and financial assistance to the elderly, and increase assistance for the poor and the unemployed. So basically, as the Economic Opportunity Act says, it was to create opportunity for everyone, particularly those who were impoverished in our various areas. So as a result of that, the York County Economic Opportunity Commission on August 2nd, 1965, created Carolina Community Actions Agency. And it was designated and recognized by the OEO, which is the Office of Economic Opportunity. It was recognized as the designated community action agency for specific counties. And they usually do it based upon a geographical area as to your service provision. And so with that, through direction from the feds, a board of directors was named. And so Carolina Community Actions first served Chester, Lancaster, York counties. Then later in 1974, our charter was amended to include Union County, South Carolina. And then, of course, in 1998, we took on Fairfield County. So we are the designated community action agency for those 5 counties. Usually, a community action agency receives federal funds called Community Service Block Grant Funds. And it's because you are the recipient of those funds, that's often why you are designated as the community action agency. And those funds are flexible funds to help the agency meet the needs of the community. So that is basically what it's about. CCA's mission is to promote eligible individuals and families by forming partnerships which will promote systemic reduction of the causes and conditions of poverty. With all of that being said, what we do all day long is to help create services and programs to alleviate poverty. And so the result will be that economically disadvantaged individuals will live with dignity while achieving their full potential. So Rocky, you and I talked last time about our hashtag, which is, and there are many, we talked about neighbors helping neighbors. That is what community action is about. And the national hashtag is helping people changing lives. And so CCA has kind of adopted that, and all of them are synonymous. And ours is meeting needs and impacting lives. So there are many ways in which community action has done that through the years. I tell people oftentimes they may not know our name, but they know our work. They know of programs that the community action agencies have initiated or served as an incubator for certain programs. Many of the community action agencies operate Head Start programs. Many of your employment and training programs were initiated in community action. We started with, Neighborhood Youth Corps. You've got Manpower, then it went to CETA, then it went to WEA and WEOA. So many of your employment training programs were initiated. Many of your food banks were initiated in community action agencies. Particularly Second Harvest Food Bank was the initiated by Charlotte Area Fund, a community action agency. And legal services, many of your legal services programs were initiated. So what community action does is conducts an assessment in the community, determines where the needs are of impoverished individuals so everyone will have opportunity. And oftentimes with those flexible funds, we are allowed to pilot programs. And oftentimes those programs become self-supporting, as legal services did, as the food bank did. But it is to meet a gap where other services may not provide some of the services that are needed to meet specific needs of individuals, but it is to fulfill and fill a gap or a niche for those particular individuals. So that is pretty much community action. There are several values and beliefs of community action that will affirm the capability and spirit of humanism collectively. And one of the things that we say, the misery of poverty must be addressed and alleviated. That's one of the things, one of the core values that we're dedicated to. We also say that poverty is unacceptable, painful, and far-reaching, and easing the misery of poverty is good, right, and essential in an affluent society. Community action identifies and addresses the causes of poverty and removes obstacles, fills gaps, and confronts the causes and conditions of poverty. So with that, the plight of the poor, we make known the plight of the poor. Again, we don't just haphazardly decide to initiate or develop a program. We conduct needs assessments with many of our partners in the community to decide, because we're not about duplicating, but we're about collaborating and coordinating. And so we talk to partners in the community and find out what is happening in our community now that needs to be addressed to afford everyone opportunity. So that is just a brief or a synopsis of what community action is about. Do you have any particular questions for me, Rocky, or I can continue?
No, I think that definitely, you know, the idea of community action, and I've always thought, you know, as I had the privilege of serving in a similar role for my hometown of Salisbury as a community action director, it is one of the hardest jobs in America, hence why I went back into practicing law. I don't make any bones about that, but I learned a lot. And one of the things I definitely learned about community action is that it is a little bit like, in sort of use sort of Charlotte uptown talk, it's an incubator, right? You hear about these terms. And so you heard a term like legal aid. So if you're in Charlotte, right, you might have heard of Charlotte Center for Legal Advocacy, formerly known Legal Services of Southern Piedmont. You might have heard of Legal Aid of North Carolina, right? I mean, they have a number of, and in South Carolina, it's like, it has a tree, right? It has the name of a tree or something like that for legal services, or am I thinking of another state?
Legal services.
Okay, I thought I had like Pine Tree Legal Service or something like that.
Well, that's the palmetto, because palmetto tree is the state tree.
Okay. Yeah, see, I'm learning a little bit more about our neighbor here to the south. But you know, so you think about legal aid for the poor, and it's something that was spun out of community action. It was an innovation. It was the idea of having lawyers for not just, you know, if you've been, arrested for a crime, but if you're facing an eviction or if you've been a victim of domestic violence or something. That was an innovation. Probably the largest innovation has ever come out of community action has been Head Start, right? You know, I mean, you know, now everyone's talking about universal pre-K and early childhood, and that's on that is in the zeitgeist that's been there. But, you know, many years ago in the 1950s and 60s, you know, I mean, first of all, think about it, like compulsory schooling, you know, the idea that you could tell farmers that their children shouldn't be on the farm and they should be, going to school was a hard sell for a lot of folks, let alone, okay, well, not just the kids who can actually be in the farm. What about these kids that you're just, you know, you're barely can barely walk? We want them into school too. It's kind of a hard sell. And so it started off in the confines of church basements and other recreation centers called community action agencies to kind of pilot something called early childhood education. And then other things that you've heard, workforce development, weatherization, any of those type of programs that are helping. These are all kind of piloted. And right now we're seeing a lot of other programs being piloted in community action agencies throughout the country. So I think definitely kind of set the stage is that community action agencies have a particular perspective, right? It's perspective that is advocacy for the poor, advocacy, and also trying to alleviate poverty. And so if you hear about Rock Hill and you hear about many, particularly Rock Hill, I mean, my vantage point is usually through my subscription to the Charlotte Business Journal. That's how I know about the big thing that's coming there in Rock Hill. There's a number of economic development, and that's all fine and dandy. I mean, no city should be avoiding economic development. But the reason why we wanted to have this conversation and want to have Karen Iris come is to talk about what is the perspective of those in Rock Hill and the Tri-County and those other counties from the bottom up. What is this growth that's coming? How does it look to them? Are they having access? Is there inclusion? And so are they going to reap the benefits of this growth that's spinning off of Charlotte, which everyone is getting? And so maybe at this time, because a lot of the folks, now here's the thing, maybe if we had this conversation 10 years ago, or maybe, most folks might have heard of Rock Hill, but I got to tell you, I think but from those counties you mentioned, there's a lot of folks who are streaming into those counties from Charlotte. if they haven't already. And I think that it behooves those folks who are maybe using these communities as somewhat of a bedroom community to kind of transport themselves through 77 or 85 or wherever to get to Charlotte to work, a little bit about where they're living and what does poverty look like from that perspective. So maybe you could give us a little snapshot of York, Rock Hill, and the other counties that you're serving, and kind of what's the demographics and what are the opportunities or what are the lack of opportunities there for these folks. So, because again, I think with our audience, I know in the last 5 years, I know at least 8 people who didn't live in North Carolina and now live in South Carolina in that area. They didn't just move to a beach or something like Hilton Head or something. I mean, no, they live. Their job is here and they are living out there. And so tell us a little bit about those areas, because they probably don't know. I'm going to tell those friends of mine right now what's going on in those towns that they're living in right now.
Well, we are aware that on average about 52 to 55 families move to Charlotte every day. Now, Charlotte does not have the capacity for all of those individuals, and I know they would get me for saying that, but many of those individuals are planting themselves in outer areas that are still part of the metro area, part of the Charlotte metro area. And so that's why some of those are coming into Rock Hill. Rock Hill, or York County, because Rock Hill is the largest city in York County. And so York County has a population of about 295,000 individuals. But over the last year, we've had a growth rate of 2.5%, which is fairly significant, because when you consider those families that are moving to the Charlotte area, but they're looking for, and many people want, while they can afford a house in Charlotte, land was always available in the Rock Hill, Chester, Lancaster County areas. And so many people are looking for more house with more land. So that's part of the attraction of them coming to the Rock Hill area. The median income for York County is about $65,000 per year. However, we also have a poverty rate of 10.47% in Rock Hill. With that being said, though, I love my city. My city was designated in 2019 as an all-American city. It beat out, it won this award over several entities across the country. And so we pride ourselves on that. But while we recognize that there is a lot of economic growth in Rock Hill, we still have issues. And unless the community takes care of all of its constituents, then it's not a thriving community. To give you some demographics or actually some statistics for 2 of the other counties that are part of that I77 corridor. For example, Chester County has a population of 32,124 individuals, but unfortunately, its growth rate over the last year was minus 20%. And its median income is about $42,000 a year, with a poverty rate of 19%.
Oh, wow.
And Lancaster County has 103,000 individuals, but it also experienced the largest growth rate of 2.95%, with a median income of $58,849, but its poverty rate is like 13.43%. So what we're seeing, and for some of the reasons that community action is trying to help in the community, and I wanted to make note too about our diverse organization as it relates to a board of directors. This community action agency is mandated through federal law to have a tripartite board of directors. And on that board of directors, one sector consists of elected officials, another sector consists of low-income individuals themselves, so that they will have a say-so and have maximum feasibility into what occurs with the agency and how the agency addresses issues. And the last sector is consists of community representatives in the community who also have a mission-minded, and their mission kind of is similar to Carolina Community Action's mission of leading individuals to self-sufficiency. But some of the current issues that we have, and I'll just throw these out there and then Iris will pick up. Some of the current community issues that are being impacted or impacting the impoverished include lack of affordable housing and long wait lists for those who qualify. And Iris will probably talk about that shortly, but I'm just going to go through the list briefly. Also, we are addressing, I was at the national convention last week, and many of our communities across the country are addressing the lack of equity in all aspects and accessibility for services. And that's one of the issues that CAAs, when I say CAAs, I'm referring to community action agencies. They are to seek, their mission or goal or purpose is to seek to create opportunities in every area, especially for low-income individuals to thrive and not just sustain. So it's a long-term effect that we seek to achieve, not just a band-aid, but teaching people, you can teach someone, you can, as the adage says, you can give them a fish to eat for a day, you teach them to fish, they eat for a lifetime. So that's what we are about. Also, we recognize that accessibility is not the same for everyone. It is not the same. And we seek equity because equity is giving people what they need to succeed. So many of the programs that we seek to, or that we choose to develop, is seeking to give people what they need, because we know that money equals accessibility in this country. Unfortunate, but it's true. There are healthcare disparities as well. There are also technology gaps due to the lack of equipment or due to the lack of internet services or the skills to operate the equipment. For example, as telehealth grows and becomes more popular and becomes not the wave of the future because it's happening now, but as more of the healthcare providers ask people to access their healthcare services through telehealth, that creates a huge issue for the low income because of the lack of opportunity for them to access telehealth. There's also a lack of abilities to pay their bills because low income households are usually disproportionately affected by economic issues, and in particularly the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of the low-income households were the first affected, and they are the last to recover even now. I don't even know if we can truly state that we're in a recovery state, even though there are a lot of funds that are being made available from the feds and from the state to help individuals, but we are still in a crisis mode and not necessarily a recovery mode. There are also labor shortages and living wage rates. While everyone is saying there are a lot of positions and employment is readily available, is that employer paying a living wage rate? For example, for York County, for example, the living wage rate for one adult and two children using the MIT calculator would be $37.41 per hour. That's for one adult with two children to be able to live comfortably in York County. For two adults with one of them working with two children, it will be $34.71 per hour. So many of the positions or the employment positions that are available are not really paying living wage rates for these individuals. So that's one of the reasons, but that also impacts our employers because now they have labor shortages. And there are lack of trained employees, and all of that has impact. So we really feel that there are solutions, and it must be that we, Community Action, target programs to help people get what they need, and that we address unjust systems where equity is not enough. Oftentimes it is not enough. So we must create programs to address injustices. That's the reason that you have second chance programs that were created, or affordable housing programs specifically designed for low income, because we're dealing with unjust systems. And the opposite of wealth is justice, not poverty. I'll say that again. The opposite of wealth is justice and not poverty. So we have to define a sustainable community with opportunity for all. But at this point, I want to give Iris an opportunity to address some of the issues that she found as it relates to those that are impacting the impoverished, and how we as community action are addressing that, even with some of our collaborative partners in the community.
Okay. And so just, Ms. Brackett-Browning did an excellent job of saying what the problems are in our counties. Here in Rock Hill, I think that we are experiencing probably the worst problem we have is the lack of affordable housing. And Rock Hill has been growing by leaps and bounds, as we have all seen over the last probably 2 or 3 years. I won't say it's outgrown itself, but I think that it just didn't plan for the amount of growth. And so what we're seeing is that housing that was typically used for low-income housing or maybe boarding houses and whatnot, those houses are now being flipped and being sold at a much higher rate. And so the people in our community that were once able to afford the boarding houses or the low rent houses, those houses are not available. And we have not replaced those with anything as of yet. And so we're seeing that our homeless population, or those that are unsheltered, is starting to grow a lot faster than our ability to provide housing for those people. Most of our senior housing and low-income housing has a waiting list of up to 2 to 2.5 years. And so if you become unsheltered, you will be unsheltered for a while in our community, because we just don't have the resources as of yet to accommodate that population. Along with that comes the fact that our wage scale, the median amount that folks are making now in Rock Hill would probably be about $10 an hour, $10.44 an hour is the rate. Well, as she explained a minute ago, for a family of 3 or 4, you need to be, both families, both wage earners need to be up to about $35 an hour. We're not realizing that here in Rock Hill. And so those who have been impacted the most by COVID and those who are impacted by low wages are not able or trained to have a higher rate. So here at Carolina Community Actions, we are actually trying to accommodate people coming in. We have programs that will help them to raise their level of ability to make income. And so most of our programs that we have, including truck driving school, CNA training, upgrading to phlebotomy training, computer skills, and et cetera, are designed to help people make a living wage. And so what we are finding is that we're a little bit behind the ball right now, trying to keep up with the demand for our population. Like Karen, I'm originally from this area. I went to high school here 100 years ago. And it was a factory town then. Everyone who was, if you wanted a job, you just went out there and you were employed by Celanese or Bowater or whatever. And I mean, I actually experienced classmates that would quit school because it was a good job to go out there. When the plants and factories left our area, it devastated the economy because of the ability for people to then make a living. And so we're seeing a lot of residual from that. A lot of our homeless people are in their 50s because they worked at these factories or low wage earning jobs for years, and were able to sustain in this community because we accommodated that. And now the community has grown so much, and the median price for a house in Rock Hill now is $284,000. For someone making $10, $12, $15 an hour, that is so out of reach right now. And so I think that as an agency, we are on board with the city on trying to find more economically advantageous ways for our population to find housing. And I think that's probably our greatest burden right now, is to keep people housed, keep them sheltered through this hiccup of the community growing so fast.
So you mentioned that you had some partners, because it sounds like, community action by itself don't get me wrong, community action is a very powerful actor, you know, in many respects in the nonprofit sector. But, you know, I mean, he said it's like $284,000 the median house. And again, you know, that's, you know, that's a lot, you know, and for a community that is, what did you say was like at least 10% is, you know, living in poverty. Those folks are, I mean, shoot, I mean, 280, that's a lot of people. That's not just, you know, that's you know, that, because that's a median, right? That's not the maximum house, you know. I mean, like, oh, well, that's not so bad if that's the maximum price house, but you know, you're talking, you know, I mean, that's hitting a lot of folks. But you know, it always says is that, you know, that then again, it's like the media, everything that I see again is filtered through the lens of, you know, economic growth, which again, I'm not here to begrudge economic growth, but it is something to say that as Rock Hill and York County is seeing, you know, astronomical rises in its, you know, median income and its tax base. And, you know, I mean, what's going to happen to once that, you know, Panthers facility goes online? I mean, I know they'll probably throw some, you know, incentives and stuff, but the other stuff, the retail, that's probably not going to get an incentive there. Tepper might get the incentive, but not, you know, they put like a Target there, they probably, you know, won't. And that's great for like, you know, city and county governments to have a, you know, have resources. But I think what you're saying here is that you've already seen a jump in your homeless population. And so that's sort of the dark side of economic growth is that you do have, unless like there are other things going on, all things being equal, you're going to see a dramatic increase in poverty, homelessness, and a lot of folks who were probably barely keeping their head above water, more or less drowning, you know, now. And so I know that we had talked about some of the partnerships because again, what I was hoping with this is that those folks in our audience or those who are connected into or want to know more about Rock Hill is that there is sort of a group of organizations and citizens and folks who are working to try to address these issues. And so could you talk a little bit about some of your partners and the partnerships that Community Action is building and joining in Rock Hill in particular in York County?
Well, I'll address one in particular that you and I talked about, and that's the Pathways Community Center. And the Pathways Community Center is actually a building that houses many of the nonprofit organizations that have the basic purpose of helping people become self-sufficient and serving particularly the homeless population, serving them with a variety of services on a continuum of care. So we are about making sure, as the community action concept is that we serve individuals on a continuum of care and on a path that leads to them being holistic and not just fragmented, because many times they're fragmented. So many of the partners and collaborations have that basic premise in mind. So with the Pathways Community Center that's located off of Cherry Road, that's where Carolina Community Action's York County office is located. There's a day shelter there. There's a men's shelter there called The Haven. There are many other entities. Mental health services can be obtained there. The city has individuals that come there and provide services. So all of it is in an effort, and that's one of the things that I would like to highlight about Rock Hill and York County, because they recognize what some of the challenges are and are addressing them, even through entities like that with the Pathways Community Center, where people, it's kind of like a one-stop shop, so to speak, where individuals can go and access services, because many of the individuals don't know how to navigate services from one place to another, or may not have the resources that will allow them to run all over town, as they put it, for lack of a better term, to access the services so they can get those particular services there. They also collaborate on grants to obtain funding for these entities to make sure that there are funds available to help the individuals get some of the services that they need. But that's just one of the entities from a more global standpoint that is bringing entities together to collaborate, coordinate, and connect. And so Iris can talk to you about some others because she's our representative on what we call CASH. And so I'll let her explain that.
So Rock Hill does have an organization called CASH, which is the Catawba Area Coalition for the Homeless. And it is a conglomeration of all the agencies that deal with homelessness or people who are in threat of being homeless. They provide grants through the state and through the city to address the needs. And so I think the major thrust of CASH right now is housing, finding affordable housing. We partner with CASH in that one of our main goals is to make sure people can stay housed. And so in that respect, we're trying to make sure they can keep their utility bills paid, because if their utilities are cut off, that's a violation of their lease and they will be kicked out. We're trying to make sure that they, if they get in trouble as far as evictions, that we are able to help them stay housed. You know, our statistics show that if they become unsheltered, it's usually about $1,500 to $1,800 for them to re-enter another place of habitation. And that's somewhere where the rent is only $500 a month. Right now, Rock Hill's trending for a 1 or 2 bedroom house anywhere from $1,000 to $1,300 a month. And that's just anywhere. And so for people who are in low income housing, who have affordable housing right now, the goal is to keep them there so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel with them. And it'll cost twice as much for them to be housed again. We also work with the city of Rock Hill, and they collaborate with us in helping to keep people's bills paid, and they work with us in not cutting off or just, you know, working with the part that we can't pay. They will set up payment arrangements so that people can keep their utilities on. And so as an agency, we spend a lot of our energy just trying to maintain and move people out of the state that they're in now.
Right, so as you stated, taking them from a critical state and getting them to a sustainable state, but then moving them along that continuum to a state of thriving and being able to thrive and be productive citizens of the community. And definitely none of this could be done without our community partners. As she was stating about the payments, we receive some payment, but their arrearage may be so much that what we could possibly provide wouldn't even be maybe 10%. So that's where it would take several entities getting together and say, okay, I'll pay this if you pay this and you pay that, for us to keep that individual housed and you know, in safe and sustainable housing.
So Karen, you had mentioned that you had gone to the national, I guess, community action conference in Boston, and I imagine that this is I'm going to try and bring in some current events. I'm sure that this was a discussion at that national level, and maybe I'm sure that it obviously is going to find its way into all of our local levels. But you know, recently the Supreme Court, you know, overturned the eviction moratorium that, you know, some very progressive activist Congress people really just basically slept outside of the halls of Congress to try to stop, but apparently that got overturned. And then just in the last, I believe on Labor Day itself, the irony of ironies is that federal unemployment benefits, I think those extra that were tacked on to whatever your state, even if your state even like is willing to give you some, you know, has lapsed. And so I guess maybe I know that it's almost like I'm asking what is 2 + 2 equals, you know, kind of like, yeah, obviously this happening, it's not good, but maybe you could highlight what some of what they're seeing from that national DC perspective and what you and your community partners and community actions are seeing, because you're already saying that, you know, people are in arrearage now, but now that these are, you know, if you thought you were going to try to pay it off now, you're really not going to have it. And so I mean, I guess, I don't know. I hope it's not a depressing question. It is a bit of a depressing question, but.
It's not a depressing question, and it is being addressed, particularly by community action. And I mentioned some of it at the beginning of our discussion when we talked about equity. And so one of the things that we found that was most profound with some of the workshops was that we're dealing with people who have who really don't understand equity, and they're the people with the pen that sign the laws or sign them or help create or the funds to send to the states and to the local entities to alleviate those particular challenges and burdens. So that's one of the things that they asked us to, is to rededicate ourselves as a community action agency to helping educate. And that's why I love this series, to help educate individuals about the community, what's happening in the community and what needs to be done. And so while there are some funds that are coming down from the feds to the state and to local organizations, it's never enough. So and also it has to be that there is a partnership with other private sector entities in order to make it work for the entire community. So we're trying to rededicate ourselves towards justice. When I stated before that money equals accessibility, but there are so many unjust systems, those are the things that we need to address. Is where is there an unjust system? Well, in affordable housing, there's an unjust system. Again, as Iris has mentioned, houses that would normally be allocated or designated for the low income, you have moderate income people now, because the inventory is so low, that are accessing those houses. They're fixing those houses up. Of course, probably when the economy rebounds, they'll probably sell the home. And when they sell the home, the low income will be unable to purchase that home. And of course, that leads to a bigger deficit as it relates to affordable housing. So those were some of the things that were being addressed. DC is addressing making funds available with, for example, talking about deficits and debt. And we had a legislative update where there's more funding should be coming for weatherization programs, because many of the low income energy burden is about 13–15%, whereas everyone else is about 7–8%, because they can't afford to have their homes air sealed and prevent energy leakage and energy escaping the home. So more funds should be available for that. There is a bill in Congress, HR 5129, which is the Modernization Act of CSBG. And as I spoke earlier, CSBG is Community Services Block Grant. Those are those funds that allow community action to be flexible in meeting the needs of the community. If they're food deserts, then they can decide, okay, let's put a grocery store over here to meet the need. So we're looking at that HR 5129 CSBG Modernization Act of 2021 being reauthorized to help individuals. So I won't say that they don't recognize what the issues are, but there is still partisan politics as it relates to how best to support and how best to address the particular challenges. So that was some of, but that's why community action is here. We have an opportunity to do good with what we have.
Absolutely. I think one of the main reasons I wanted to definitely touch about community action, in the upstate area in particular, but just in general, is again that we do talk about a lot of these issues of poverty and systemic issues and such. And I hope that you in the audience are just thinking, well, this is intractable and such. Is that one of the reasons we want to have this conversation, that either those of you who are in the audience, or you probably know people who work in Charlotte, but do live in one of these 5 counties and are taxpayers and are members there. And, while, I myself commute from another place to Charlotte, but I do consider myself a resident of the home county where I am, and I try to be involved and such. And so as you hear, she mentioned, Karen mentioned, they have a board of directors at Community Action. All community action agencies are grassroots, sort of community-based organizations, because the essence of community action isn't a top-down approach to poverty. It's not, when Lyndon Johnson signed that bill, he didn't say, and now we're just going to do everything in your community for you. The idea is that community organizations will be created, and we'll give them the money because those organizations know what's best in their communities. It's not a one size fits all edict from Washington, D.C. It is, what do they think there in Lancaster County or and I know that these organizations, community action, they do community needs assessments to kind of find out and kind of dig deeper into what's necessary. But, how it kind of dovetails into the type of work that I do is that, I work with community action agencies because they are nonprofits. They are 501c3s, almost all of them, unless they're public. I've never run into a public community. I know they exist, but they're almost all 501c3 nonprofits with community-based board of directors. And as Karen mentioned, elected officials or their representatives are asked to be on these boards, low-income folks, but there's also an area for any folks who in the community, whether they're from the business community, education, clergy, unions, business, finance, you name it. And I think that if you want to do something, and if you are, or you live in these areas where Karen and Iris are, and you want to kind of be a part of that solution, yes, you do live in these areas, and and maybe you're making your money in Charlotte and such, but you are living in an area that is facing a lot of issues because, in some respects, because a lot of folks are moving to Rock Hill, and that's not but the idea here is to whatever extent that you can give back to these communities that you're now, calling and putting on your zip code, on your mailing address, on your mailing label. And one way to give back is to get involved with an organization like Carolina Community Actions, or one of their community partners, like the Community Center. That these are all, I think, set up as 501c3s. They are able to take donations that are tax deductible. Obviously, Carolina Community has been a 501c3 probably since they created 501c3. It sounds like it's been around for a while. But if you want to kind of give back and such, is either maybe apply to join a board. In whether it's the community action board, because I trust me. I mean, you're always looking for talent, as far as a director in the management team to come in there. There's a lot of other organizations. So if you have time in your day, join a board of one of these organizations that's really toiling in the areas of poverty and homelessness and such, because there you can be part of that solution that is begging for a solution as such. And so Karen, I know we're about getting into question time, but if there's some folks who want to know more about Carolina Community Actions, they live or have friends or family in the Rock Hill or in the Tri-County or in those 5 county areas, how can they get in touch with you? And I mean, obviously they can donate. I'm pretty sure you've got a ability for them to donate on your website, but what's your website? How can they reach you?
www.carolinacommunityactions.org, and we are in the process of revising it, but it's still active right now. And then our main administrative office number is 803-329-5195. That's 803-329-5195. And so all of that information is listed on our website. We would gladly accept volunteers. We actually will be having a vacancy for York County on our board in the community sector come October. So if there are individuals that are interested, then they can contact me. When they dial that number, they can access the directory and get me directly. We do accept donations because, as I've ever mentioned, the grant funds are never enough. They are never enough. So sometimes it may leave in, and they're unallawables. For example, with the utilities, there are certain things that we can pay if someone's bill is behind or in an arrearage, but there are other things that we cannot pay with those grant funds. So we rely on donations to help us catch that individual up. We may not be able to pay storm drain fees or garbage fees. And that still doesn't mean that that individual is behind and could possibly be disconnected because of that. We just have to find other ways to do that. So we would, and just to find out even more about the programs that that we operate. Again, we operate the Head Start, early Head Start programs. We have a community service block grant self-sufficiency program where we provide a case management approach to individuals to becoming self-sufficient and improving their plight. We have general emergency assistance programs, nutrition assistance programs, youth leadership, low-income home energy assistance program where we meet their energy needs, utility bills, etc. Weatherization, and recently most of the community action agencies across the country have just been awarded funds from LIHEAP for a household water assistance program to help individuals pay their water utility bill as it relates to water. Because that was an issue as well. So please, 803-329-5195 is our main office number. And if you know anyone in all those 5 counties, in Chester, Fairfield, Lancaster, Union, and York, if you call that main number, we can get them directed appropriately.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, we got a little bit of time for questions. I know it's an opportunity for those of you who've heard, and you know, again, you don't have to necessarily live in the Tri-County area or in South Carolina to ask a question, because again, community action and these issues affect all of us. So if you feel free, unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question, or you can punch something into the chat. All right, I don't see any. Wait. Did we got somebody coming in?
Hey, Rocky, this is Todd. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation, the conversation. I'm in Lancaster County, unincorporated, so I don't find out about this stuff normally. So it's just good to hear and good to get the information. So appreciate it.
Thank you, Todd, for joining us. I mean, this is, again, you know, so many folks are just finding themselves, whether they're just arbitrarily moving the line between North and South Carolina, and somehow you wake up like, wait, I'm in South Carolina? When is that? You know, but it's a good thing, you know, because we should, you know, there's never fear new neighbors, right? Isn't it, Karen? Neighbors helping neighbors. And so
it's neighbors helping neighbors, and we welcome everyone. Yeah.
And so that's really the whole point. It's not just to be like, well, here's all bleak things going on here. Is that, you know, we're neighbors. Everyone's got problems. We've been in a big problem for I don't know, 2 years now. Has it really been almost 2? Oh Lord. I mean, you know, I mean, it's just been that way. And so, you know, one of the ideas of the leadership series is just to educate folks and try to at least, you know, while we don't have all the answers, at least give you at least maybe walk away with one. And one is, if you're in this community, there are folks who've been doing it since the 60s. And community-based organization. So it's not, you know, some know-it-alls, you know, in DC saying, here, you do this. I mean, you know, it's folks like us who are, you know, are talking to our neighbors and finding out, what do you need? And it sounds like what they need is some housing, or they're really facing homelessness. And so I think those are, you know, I think that a lot of that is just relationships and just talking to people and getting beyond just kind of ideas of whatever is in the TV idea or whatever of people or low income. I mean, you know, the privilege I've had, you know, for my period is just like you, you know, it's just like some of us, you know, honestly, you get a couple of bad pay cycles, you're gonna be right there too. So, I mean, you know, this is, you know, I mean, we all are in this together. And I think that's the kind of the underlying idea here is that, you know, we're all, but for the grace of God, right? But for the grace of God, that's, you know, and such. We got any other questions? But again, thank you, Todd. I gotta be some questions, comments even. I know Shannon will say something. She's got to.
I mean, the thing that I see where I'm living in the very northern tip of Lancaster County is just the rapid gentrification. When I moved here 12 years ago, we used to have farms all around here. And now if you have a piece of land, you've probably sold it because they're going to build something on it. And so for folks who are not of means, there is I suspect, a massive gentrification issue.
It is, and that is the issue that has contributed to the lack of affordable housing, gentrification, because again, low-income individuals are always disproportionately affected by some of those particular strategies.
I know you want to say something, Shannon.
I can jump on. I thought Chris might want to say something because I know he's a South Carolina person too. I tried to get some South Carolina people on. So.
Yeah, I got a lot of love for the Palmetto State. Come on, South Carolina people, holler. Come on.
No, I joined late, and I'm sorry about that. It's, but I caught part of the conversation. But I do know that, you know, anything affordable housing is just, you know, I'm in the Fort Mill area, and watching that in Rock Hill, you know, I get the need, and I've got other friends in the area who say they can't. I think I heard the statistic. Was it a one-bedroom going from 1,000 to 1,300 a month now, or something? And it seems like anything that's a 3-bedroom rental, starting price is 1,800, and I just look around, scratch my head at that. So I know this is a hot topic, and I know this is an important initiative.
And if I could just add on the subject of the gentrification, you know, we're finding out that normally the low-income neighborhoods around the city, if you are within 5 miles of center city of Rock Hill, those houses years ago, even 5 or 10 years ago, were probably at a rate of about 120, and now they're over 250 and 275. And so we're seeing a turn in the neighborhood, and the folks that have grown up there and who have lived there for years cannot afford to stay in those neighborhoods. And there's really nowhere for them to go now. I mean, what has happened is that, like the gentleman from Lancaster said, people have moved out, they've taken up the property, they've built bigger houses. But when they decide to move back into the city because the city is thriving and people want to be in center city, the folks that were in center city cannot afford those houses that were out there that were built on that property. So it's almost a catch-22.
Is that a live sound effect? I mean,
that is our train that comes by every day. So now you truly know that you're in the South, when your office building is next to the train track.
Well, for those of you in the Rock Hill area, you should definitely pay Karen Iris a visit there at Carolina Community Actions. It's I mean, Rock Hill is a real delightful town. I mean, I've enjoyed every time I've gone there. I mean, I was a kid, you know, the only time I'd go there, like they'd have like TV wrestling at Winthrop, you know, college. So I'd go and watch like Dusty Rhodes or something like that. But now it's a real, you know, it's a metro. I mean, it's a real city. I mean, it's no joke. I mean, it's you know, it's a great town. And again, you know, this is not to bring down the success of Rock. I mean, you should put your chest out, and you're an all-American city. But I think at the same time, to be truly an all-American city is to look at those who are, you know, least who are being affected by the growth, and figure out ways to make sure that there's a place for them, you know, as well as this city thrives. And it's going to. I mean, it's thriving. I mean, that's facts. These are facts. I mean, it's a great town.
Rocky, I wanted to add too, but not only have Community Action been invited to address issues, but even in the planning, even in the planning of the city and of the county, we are invited to participate, so that there are many perspectives as it relates to the planning process. Of making sure that, you know, that the economic growth does not adversely affect everyone to a so-called disproportionate level. So we've been invited to participate in those conversations, and that's part of what Community Action does as well, keep individuals informed of what is happening, and to, as you have aforementioned, to advocate on behalf of the target groups that we serve. So with that being said, each of our counties allow us to do that, to have a seat at the table with that. And that's when you will get a community that addresses all of the issues. So we're happy that Rock Hill addresses the issues. We're just trying to identify the solutions and implement solutions to the issues.
All right. Well, Shannon, you want to just take us out?
Well, does anyone else want to add anything, Bill or Kelly? Going, gone. Okay. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you on the 22nd. We're going to talk about what is a lobbyist.
Thank you.
Take care,
All right,
guys.
thanks, guys.
Bye. Have a
Thank
great
you.
week.
Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.